Welcome to Inside City Hall. I'm your host, Mayor Daryl Seymore, and today our guest is Bill Cupp, Public Works Director for the City of Show Low. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Glad to have you today. We're going to talk a little bit today about our waste treatment plant that we're currently building, something that I guess give us a little background. Years ago we had a state-of-the-art waste facility treatment, how we used to handle it, and why we are now going to a full-blown treatment plant that's chemically treated.
Well, about 10 years ago, city staff realized that the city was growing at a rapid pace, and we anticipated that we were going to have to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant just for capacity reasons. And a lot of those capacity improvements can be funded with the fees that the developers were paying. So we did have some money on hand for those. The other thing that happened in about 2008, our ZIPDs permit, which is our ADEQ permit, Department of Environmental Quality, was due for a renewal. We submitted our application, and about 2.5 years later, we got our application back, and one of the things that changed was that they had new standards for ammonia and selenium that we currently, with the plant that we had, we couldn't meet those. And they gave us 42 months from that date in 2011 to address those. So we moved forward with, the first thing we did was we commissioned a study, and the study looked at our wastewater collection system, then it analyzed the existing plant that we had to see what type of treatment we could achieve, and if we could meet those standards. It was determined that we could not. Then the third phase was to look at new technologies for wastewater treatment, and compare a number of things. Really it was the efficiency of the treatment, and the other one was the long-term costs. And from there, we got a direction to move forward with the type of plant that we were going to construct.
Okay. It's something, when we look at different communities, we're not the only community that's started building these. I know Kingman had to build 2 of them in their facility that they had to change and upgrade, maybe for a different reason than what we had. But one of the things that we had was our treatment plant that would exist. So let's talk a little bit, what is going to change as far as out at Telephone Lake, some of those wastelands that we currently use. Will we still be sending byproduct out there, or will that go away?
No, we have a memorandum of understanding with Game and Fish and the Forest Service that requires us to provide them with a minimum of 600,000 gallons per day of our treated effluent. Now this is treated effluent. It's disinfected. It's clean water. It's not drinking water, but it's clean water to discharge out to those wetlands. Those wetlands really were kind of a sensation, especially when they first went in, because it was really showed a partnership type of arrangement with federal agencies and local agencies, and we created those wetlands that are great for wildlife habitat and things like that. That's all going to stay in place. We're not replacing any of those. That's really just where we dispose of that treated water.
And but the treated water will be cleaner, a higher quality than what we're existing now disposing out there.
It will be, as far as ADEQ's classification, it will be the same classification. However, because this new plant has clarifiers installed, the effluent will be a lot cleaner when it comes out of the plant, even before it's chlorinated. So we'll have to be able to put less chlorine, add less chlorine to disinfect that. So it will be higher quality. However, it won't be a higher quality classification as far as the regulators are concerned.
What has been the challenge to construct a new plant in the same place that you have your existing, plant that we're operating? How have you been able to coordinate keeping everything going and still building a new plant?
The existing plant had 2 large lagoons. The new plant fits in a portion of one of those lagoons, the northernmost lagoon. What we've done is we took the northernmost lagoon completely out of the process, so we're just using a single lagoon, bypassing the second lagoon, and we're filling that and doing our work there. One of the I guess it was somewhat anticipated consequences of that is we have to use more chlorine in the process because we've got half the treatment time. So that was something that was a challenge, and it's a financial challenge too because we're using quite a bit more chlorine there. The other thing is that because we were using that northern lagoon, we had to remove all of the material that was in there, the biosolids material. Part of the money-saving approach that the city took was that instead of having the general contractor perform that work and have their markups and other things, and also in order to get the project started sooner, the city actually contracted with a local farmer who has the ability to take those biosolids, and we worked with him to get those cleaned out, and we saved in the neighborhood of $120,000 by performing that part of the operation ourselves and partnering with the local farmer.
Okay. So a lot of it is analyzing, going through what we can do to make things more cost effective, doing what we can. Now, where are we at in the process right now? Are we 30% done, 40%? And when do you anticipate that we'll be online 100% with the new system?
Construction started December 1st of last year. So we're several months into the process. I would say as far as the schedule goes, we're about 25% into the schedule. We are scheduled to complete the project on January 16th of 2016, and we are within a few days of being right on that schedule.
Great. Let's talk about cost. Something like this is definitely expensive. It's something that I think years ago we were throwing out numbers in the $20 to $25 million range that we would need to have to build a waste treatment plant. And I think with technology and things changing, those costs have changed a little bit for our advantage. So tell us a little bit about what the cost is and how we were able to fund this project going forward.
Okay. The cost of the project is $10.48 million. And as you just said, we were anticipating several years ago that it was going to be many times that cost. And because of technology, and also I think because of the economy, construction costs have dropped significantly. So for a 2.5 million gallon per day plant, spending about $10 million is a tremendous value. And we're happy to have that price. As far as funding the project goes, the city, in anticipation, had been saving money. We also collected, as I mentioned earlier, we collected development fees from all the developers that were happening here in the early 2000s. Those fees were paid to pay their way, basically, so the development would pay their way towards the capacity that we needed to accommodate their new development. So we had about $7 million saved either as capacity fees or as money that we had set aside as the city. Then we did borrow $3 million. We sold bonds for $3 million to get us up to 10, and then the other $500,000 or so we're using our capital project fund from our wastewater program.
Okay. Years ago it was said that sometimes our building permits were a little bit high, or some of these things may be concerned to neighboring communities. But I think that was because years ago there was a study done that as Show Low grew, some of these costs would need to be absorbed or paid as a result of some of these developers coming in and expanding. And had we not raised our permit fees at that time, we still would have been required to build this plant, but it would have been on our own dime, and at that point would have been borrowing much more money. It was a blessing that we had the big economy boom and several homes were built, and that we were able to take those areas that money was designated strictly for this purpose or for improvements of sewer and water, and was able to accumulate that $7 million. So we're blessed to have growth and at the same time to be able to pay for it. Didn't cover 100%. I think had we continued building out some of the other subdivisions, had we not gone into the recession, we probably would have been projected really close to have had this funded almost 100%. And there. Now, $2.5 million, what does that get us from where we were, the $2.5 million, how far are we projecting ahead that capacity will probably take care of us, and then what would be our next step forward if we needed to expand that?
Our average daily flow right now is about 800,000 gallons per day. And of course, we're building a 2.5 million gallon per day plant. So we've got about 3 times capacity than we have on our average day flowing into the plant. We actually have to design the plant for a little higher capacity because we do have peak days when we get higher flows than that. But, and you know, some of the population projections is guesswork, but I think we're good for 15 to 20 years with the projected growth rates that we have right now. The other thing that about this capacity, and part of the reason why we went with so much larger of a plant, was when we did our study for the wastewater plant, we actually discovered that we could go to a 1.25 million gallon per day plant, or a 2.5 million gallon per day plant. And we discovered, because we were building that in basically in an existing hole that we already had, the difference in cost, I mean, there was some equipment and machinery and things, but the biggest difference in cost was the amount of dirt that we would have had to put back into that hole. So we went from the 1.25 MGD plant to the 2.5 MGD plant for about 300,000 more. So we doubled a $10 million, you know, a $10.1 million project, doubled our capacity by adding a few $100,000.
Now, as we have been building this, there have been some savings as well, because there have been some equipment that maybe the contractors needed out there, that rather than renting it, we purchased it, and now we'll have some of those equipments. You want to touch base on any of those little items?
Yeah, some of the items that we did to save money was, for instance, we have a long-reach forklift out there that they need for much of the construction duration. And we took a look at the contractor's cost for that particular item and thought, hey, maybe the city can provide that equipment and realize the savings. We did actually rent that for a year from a local equipment company, and saved a tremendous amount of money on that. Some other things we did was they needed an air compressor, and of course they charge us for all the equipment they have on site. We already had budgeted to buy a new compressor, so we provided the compressor that we purchased, and they have that at the site, and basically we're sharing that with our contractor and saving those dollars. Another thing that we did is the process equipment, and there's things like our blowers and our clarifier equipment and the actual biological process equipment. The city purchased that equipment ourselves instead of purchasing that through the contractor. And what that did was that saved us a significant amount of money on their markups as well. So we're actually purveying the equipment instead of paying the contractor to purvey the equipment.
Well, I think staff has done a fantastic job in taking the budget that council approved to work with, and then finding ways to keep it within that budget. It's no easy task to take on a project like this, and a lot of times we have overages or overcosts. But I think through these overcosts, you guys have done a great job with creatively finding ways that we could continue to save money, which ultimately keeps it on budget and on track. And not only are we on budget, but we're on time, that we're able to be going forward with that. You know, one of the things too that people don't realize, that we have to protect the water that goes into that drainage. So maybe it's the runoff, stormwater, drains, maybe somebody's just washing their car and it ends up going down the road, down into a drainage ditch where it could maybe go onto a yard or a lawn. How does that affect the gallons that we take in every day that we have to treat?
The biggest impact we have that gives us our peak flows are during the wet seasons. During the monsoon season, our inflow at the wastewater plant increases up to 1.25 million gallons per day, and a lot of that is we've got manholes that are in washes, obviously, because those are the low points and things like that. So a lot of that is basically rainwater, but yeah, there are other pollutants that come in there, and this type of plant, it's a biological process, and basically you have the bugs that live in the lagoons, and we feed them lots of air so they can breathe lots of air, and they grow and they eat those things, the pollutants and the other waste material.
Okay, on that. So as far as being done on time, is there anything that you see that would be a challenge? I mean, weather can have a benefit. How are we protected? Because this plant is close to Sholo Creek. I mean, it has some buffer zone there. How much better is this plant going to be in the event that we had a big flood and maybe the two mixed? Are we isolating now to the point where we wouldn't have any spillage of our waste treatment?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One of the things is that we're actually raising that site about 2 feet. In order to make as much of that process work with gravity, we had to raise the site 2 feet. The existing site currently is outside of the 100-year floodplain. So it's a high spot, even though it's close proximity to the creek, it's outside of the 100-year floodplain. The other thing that we're doing besides raising that is that we're moving the plant, the actual process, probably 100 feet or so further away from the creek where it is now. So we'll have not only vertical increase, but a horizontal increase in our separation from Sholo Creek.
Okay. We currently have an odor easement down through that area. What do you anticipate the change of odor being when this plant is totally functionable?
The reality is with this process, there's going to be much less odor. There probably going to be, when we're commissioning and getting the process figured out and getting the whole thing started, there may be some additional odors. But really this is I actually visited a Biolac plant, the same technology up in Tucson, and there's very little odor there.
Okay, great. What physical looking at it is going to change? I mean, if somebody drove out there today, would they see a physical difference of what the old plant used to be versus what this plant's going to be?
We're actually starting to construct the walls in our clarifiers. There are two 60-foot diameter concrete facilities, and if you drove out there now, you'd see those clarifiers starting to come out of the ground. And so those will come up above grade. In addition to that, we'll have 2 new buildings out there. We'll have a building that houses our blowers and other equipment, and then we'll have an operations and control building there as well.
Okay, and that's one of the things that people need to understand. Why do we need another building? Why can't we just continue to operate how we have been? Why do we need to construct a building out there?
Well, we have the building that the new operations and control building is going to be that place where we do control the operation of the plant. There's going to be some redundant operation ability in the blower building, but we're going to move the controls into the operations and control building. We also have an area for a laboratory in the operations and control building. We do have a lab right now, but it's really, really tiny, and we really do need more space. Our plan is to increase the amount of testing and lab work that we do, and that in turn is going to save us money because we're not paying the labs down in Phoenix to do the analysis on our plant.
Oh, that's great. If somebody wanted to see the plant, where's the plant located?
The plant is located on 6th is it Avenue or Street?
Avenue. I think it's 6th
It's
Avenue.
on 6th Avenue, just off of Old Linden Road, north of the city cemetery.
Okay. You can just drive down that section. You're going to see it be on the east side of the road, and it's something that you probably wouldn't miss too. It'd be kind of hard to miss it if you're looking for sewer plant. But
Look for the ducks.
the ducks and stuff that way. You know, it's something that, I think we have to be, grateful to have, that we've been able to plan for this. We'll be able to bring this online and hopefully for many years ahead. The cost, what do we think overall that's going to do to the customer's sewer bill? Do we think that we will be able to keep that close to where we're currently at, or do we think that we'll have to have a little bit of increase going forward?
We actually had economist.com, they're the folks that they did a prior rate study a couple years ago. When we started looking at the amount of money we were going to have to borrow, the $3 million that we were going to borrow, we brought them back in to take a look at our, not just our costs, but our revenues and our growth and things like that. And they came back with some recommendations on rate increases. And my recollection is that the rate increase is going to be just at or under $3, which coincides with savings that we had on our garbage collection rates. So at least for the short term, we won't see any reduction or any increase in our rates because of that offset.
Offset there. Well, that's fantastic. It's one of those things that's hard to balance. You know, people don't realize that, but when they hit the water, they want water, and when they flush, they want it to flush. Those are things that's a big cost for the city. It's something that we spend a lot of money in. It's not just a sewer treatment plant. It's getting all of the lines tied together to end up in one place throughout our community. So it's really a big job, and those lines, they go through wear and tear. They're like anything. It's a maintenance program that has to be adhered to. There are federal guidelines, there are state guidelines, there's EPA guidelines that everything has to meet. But we appreciate the opportunity to share with the public that what we're doing is controlling their money the best that we can. We will have a state-of-the-art facility. It isn't something that necessarily we would have brought on immediately because what we had was working, but it was not meeting the guidelines that's required nowadays. So, but doing this, we can change and we can tweak with this. If something else comes with a new standard we have to bring it to, we'll be able to change that because by chemicals that we're working with, understanding. Any final comments you want to share?
I would just say that I would commend our city council and our leadership for looking ahead, starting 10 or so years ago at the needs, the future needs that we have here, and continuing to be I think a model city especially for this region.
No. Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us today, Bill.
Thank you,
appreciate it. If you have any questions that you'd like answered here on the show, please call them at 532-4061 and we'll answer them. Thanks for watching today and have a great day.